Senator Siewert.
Mr Deputy President, tomorrow, the 3rd of December, is International Day of People with Disability. International Day of People with Disability is a United Nations sanctioned day that aims to promote an understanding of people with disability and encourage support for their dignity, rights and well-being. Under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Australia is obligated to ensure and protect all human rights and fundamental freedoms for people with disabilities. Under the Convention, Article 1 says its purpose. The purpose of the present Convention is to promote, protect and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all persons with disabilities and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. Under Article 5, it says state parties shall put in place effective legislation and policies, including women and children-focused legislation and policies, to ensure that instances of exploitation, violence and abuse against persons with disabilities are identified and investigated and, where appropriate, prosecuted. It also has a number of other articles that protect and go to the safeguards of people with disabilities. Last week we have had a call for, which I strongly support, as do many thousands of Australians, 10,000 at the last count on the petition, called for a national inquiry to look at the issues of abuse that were highlighted in the Four Corners program last week, but also specifically to look at violence against people with disability, especially women with disabilities, which is far more excessive than violence against the general population. And the reason we need it is because 90% of Australian women with an intellectual disability have been subject to sexual assault, domestic violence or other forms of violence than other women and girls. There is no national coordinated legislation to prevent and address violence against people with disability, including family and domestic violence. The United Nations treaty monitoring bodies have made strong recommendations to Australia in regards to addressing all forms of violence against people with disability. Data around violence and abuse against people with disability is often not collected, is recorded as in-house and is reduced to administrative error. There is no independent statutory national protection mechanism to protect, investigate or enforce findings related to abuse experienced by people with disability. People with disability living in institutional settings continue to experience violence, particularly sexual violence, in residential and institutional settings where they frequently experience sustained and multiple episodes. This is a national disgrace and deserves a national inquiry. I have had email after email, people telling me why they think there should be a national inquiry. I don't have time to read out all of them that I've received, but I want to read out in people's own voices why they think that we need a national inquiry. We'll start with somebody who's asked not to be named. In fact, most people have asked not to be named. But I start, and I got an email saying, hello, I'm a disability advocate. I'm a spastic quadriplegia. I have spastic quadriplegia, otherwise known as cerebral palsy. 5 years ago, I was in institutional care where I had to have support workers take care of me 24/7 due to my disability. During my stay there, I saw and experienced things people should never have to experience. Support workers would forget to give me food and water and even forget to feed me my medications critical to my living. There was also a time where I suffered acute dehydration and constipation because they did not give me my water through my feeding tube. Lastly, my chair was often soiled with urine and faeces because no one checked on me or gave me enough time on the toilet. My chair also broke often because the workers did not know how to operate it. Most of the time I sat in my room alone, helpless and feeling sorry for myself. Throughout my time there, I was constantly under emotional distress, so much so that for a time I stopped eating. I was also sexually abused during my stay there, but I do not feel comfortable talking about it in an email, and I would like to talk face-to-face about that. I have also seen other instances happening where clients fell out of their hoists or out of bed on a regular basis because the care centre did not offer support workers sufficient training in hoisting or lifting. Other clients were also given the wrong medications and had to have their stomachs pumped in hospital. I'm writing to you to let you know there is a great need for a national inquiry by the federal government into all aspects of disability care in institutional settings. We hear too often of people being taken advantage of sexually and physically. Their liberties are taken away from them and they have no way of speaking out. I want to get my story out and speak on behalf of those disadvantaged and marginalised individuals. I was lucky to get out, others not so much. I am calling on the media to help us vulnerable people with disabilities have a chance to speak out and obtain justice. We do not talk enough about the physical and emotional toll it takes on these individuals. What is worse, if you are unable to communicate your problems or have family or friends to support you, you are left with no hope, nowhere to go and certainly no justice. Given the Four Corners interview about Urella, I think now is the right time for a positive cultural change. It is sickening to think that a lot of abuse goes unnoticed, more so when the federal government chooses to turn a blind eye and place the responsibility on the states. It is time for care service providers to be made accountable and for clients to be able to heal from the pain, anger and torture that they have suffered. To do this, we need a national inquiry. It is not enough for the federal government to say that the states should deal with this systemic problem. And then another one. My son has severe autism and a chromosomal abnormality that makes him very small and very cute. He has only been in residential care twice. He was 8 years old when respite for a month at a residential care unit was suggested to me by my case manager. He looked more like a 4-year-old. I expressed my fears that he could not speak, that as he could not speak, I would have little way of knowing if anyone hurt him if he was out of my care. My caseworker pointed to the real importance of me needing a break and respite and that my son would be okay without me in the safe care of professionals. The first weekend he came back happy. When I picked him up the second time, he was not making his usual happy noises. When he arrived home and I asked him if he had fun, and he had begun to shake uncontrollably. This was unusual. I had to hold and cuddle him in my arms for 3 hours as he shook, as if he had been terrorised. He would not let me go. I have no idea what happened at that residential care house, but I have never seen him so scared. Watching Four Corners last weekend made me feel physically sick. Why is it that the government is not doing more to protect these precious people? I will always be my son's voice. Do something about the rampant abuse of special needs people, please. I can't care for my son for the rest of my life alone. And what happens when I die? We are vulnerable and count on a national inquiry into the abuse of people with disability. And another one, this is from a support worker. I have worked as a support worker for the past almost 4 years and have worked with some beautiful, beautiful people of all abilities in that time. But I've also seen people spoken to and treated in some awful ways. The majority of staff I work with are people who have genuine respect for the people they support, but the system is incredibly under-resourced and only getting more stretched and stressed as the NDIS rolls out. And then another one. As a disabled person myself, I support a move to a national inquiry into abuse in the disability sector. I am fortunate in the service provider for 3 years. I've had to have a service provider for 3 years where everyone but one carer was respectful and ethical towards people with disability. The one carer in question was acting inappropriately when I was around, but thankfully when I spoke out, action was taken and the person was kicked out. While my service provider acted in good faith, others have not, and that is why this inquiry is needed and how much neglect, abuse, assault there are in the disabilities how much neglect, abuse and assault there is in the disability sector in Australia. And then there's another one. It is inappropriate to investigate only Urella when the evidence is that the abuse of people with disabilities is across many services, including children at school. It is inappropriate for the state to investigate as it will be investigating itself in the main and its own subcontractors. This presents a significant conflict of interest. A national inquiry, properly resourced, is the only appropriate answer. I have managed to protect my happy and beautiful 17-year-old daughter, who has a wonderful sense of humour and also has cerebral palsy and autism. But what will happen to her when I die? It makes me feel sick to my stomach. The only way to lessen that sick feeling is to see something done and to try and improve the situation. And finally, it is not on for anybody to abuse anybody else. Full stop, ever.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing